What if the very thing you have been chasing is moving farther away because of the way you're chasing it? That question unsettles people because it touches a truth most never stop to examine. We are taught to want more, push harder, focus intensely, and hold tightly to the outcome we desire. Yet the deeper we cling, the more tension we create inside ourselves. And tension has a frequency. It speaks before words do. It says, I do not have this. I am afraid I may never have it. I need this to complete me. That silent message becomes stronger than any affirmation. This is where the hidden paradox begins. Desire, when mixed with emotional dependence, does not attract. It contracts. It turns longing into pressure and pressure into resistance. The mind calls it determination, but the body experiences it as lack. And reality responds not only to what you ask for, but to the identity from which you ask. So the real question is not, what do you want? It is, who are you being while you want it? Have you ever noticed how the moment something becomes too important, it also begins to feel out of reach? Almost as if life itself quietly steps back, creating distance between you and the very thing you're trying to hold on to. This is not coincidence. It is a precise response to the way your mind assigns value. When you place something on a pedestal, whether it's a relationship, money, success, or recognition, you unconsciously declare that it is above you, bigger than you, more powerful than you. And in that moment, you shrink your own position in relation to it. The gap is created internally long before it appears externally. This is what ancient teachings and modern quantum interpretations often describe as balancing forces. Not as punishment, but as correction. When importance becomes exaggerated, the system compensates by creating instability, delay, or even loss, simply to restore equilibrium. And here is the subtle danger. The more you try to fix this by wanting it even more, the stronger the imbalance becomes. So ask yourself honestly, are you trying to attract it? Or have you unknowingly made it unreachable by needing it too much? If this is already shifting something in you, subscribe and stay with me. There's a deeper layer to this that most people never see. Like this video so you don't lose this thread. What would happen if you stopped needing the outcome but didn't stop moving toward it? Most people assume that if they let go, they will lose motivation, direction, or desire. But that belief hides a deeper misunderstanding. Detachment is not withdrawal, it is refinement. It is the moment your energy stops reaching outward in desperation and begins stabilizing within. When you are attached, your attention is fragmented. Part of you is acting, but another part is anxiously checking, doubting, waiting. This internal split weakens your presence. But when you become neutral, when you reach that quiet state of, I'm fully available to this, but I don't depend on it, something shifts. Your energy becomes contained, coherent, focused, and coherence is magnetic. You begin to act without tension. You speak without seeking approval. You move without forcing outcomes. And paradoxically, this is when opportunities begin to respond differently to you, not because you are chasing them, but because you are no longer resisting their arrival. So, here is the deeper question. Are you truly pursuing what you want? Or are you unconsciously pushing it away by needing it to validate you? Why does wanting something so intensely often leave you feeling emptier instead of closer to it? Because beneath the surface of desire, there is often an identity quietly being reinforced, the identity of someone who does not have it. And reality does not respond to your words or even your intentions as much as it responds to that identity. Every time you say, I really want this, your system is not only expressing a preference, It is confirming a state of absence. It is subtle, almost invisible, but powerful. The stronger the emotional charge behind that desire, the more deeply that sense of lack becomes embedded into your internal field. This is why two people can pursue the same goal with completely different outcomes. One moves with a sense of certainty, as if what they want is already part of their path. The other moves with urgency, doubt, and emotional dependence. Their actions may look similar, but the frequency behind them is not. And frequency shapes perception, behavior, and ultimately results. So pause for a moment and reflect. When you think about what you want most, do you feel expansion, or do you feel the quiet weight of not having it yet? What if your true power was never in what you chase, but in how stable you remain without it? This is where magnetism is born, not from effort, but from internal steadiness. When your emotional state is not dictated by external outcomes, you stop reacting to life and start influencing it. Most people leak energy without realizing it. Their mood rises and falls based on messages, attention, validation, or results. They feel good when something goes right and unstable when it doesn't. This creates an inconsistent signal, one that is constantly shifting, searching, adjusting. And inconsistency weakens attraction. But when you are internally anchored, something changes. You no longer need the outcome to feel complete. You choose it, you move toward it, but you are not defined by it. Your energy stops reaching outward and begins radiating from within. And that radiance carries a different quality, one of quiet certainty. This is what people feel when they say someone has presence. It's not charisma in the traditional sense. It's stability. It's self-containment. It's coherence. So ask yourself, are you trying to become attractive to what you want, or are you becoming stable enough that it naturally aligns with you? Have you ever felt exhausted after trying to be seen, understood, or validated, without knowing exactly why? That exhaustion often comes from something subtle but powerful. Your energy is not anchored within you, it is leaking outward. Every time you seek approval, attention, or reassurance, a part of your energy leaves your center and attaches to something external. It might be a person, a response, a result, or even an imagined outcome. And the more you do this, the less presence you have left within yourself. You become scattered, dependent, and quietly depleted. This is what we can call leaky energy. It doesn't feel like a loss at first. It feels like effort, like trying, like caring. But over time, it weakens your internal field. It makes you more reactive, more sensitive to rejection, more dependent on feedback to feel stable. Now imagine the opposite. You pull your energy back. You stop reaching outward for confirmation. You begin to hold your attention within yourself, not in isolation, but in ownership. And suddenly something shifts. So reflect for a moment. Where is your energy right now, centered within you, or scattered across everything you're trying to hold on to? What if attraction was never about pulling things toward you, but about no longer pushing them away? This is where most people misunderstand the entire dynamic. They try to project energy outward, to influence, to impress, to control outcomes. But true attraction doesn't begin with projection. It begins with return. When you bring your energy back into yourself, something subtle but profound happens. You become more present, more grounded, more aware of your own internal state. And from that place, your actions stop being driven by insecurity or urgency. They begin to carry clarity. This is what creates real influence. Not force, not persuasion, but presence. Think about someone who doesn't need to convince anyone of anything. They don't over-explain. They don't chase attention. Yet people are drawn to them.
Why?
Because their energy is not scattered. It is contained, centered, and self-sufficient. And here is the paradox. The less you try to pull things toward you, the more space you create for them to arrive naturally. So, ask yourself honestly, are you trying to attract from a place of fullness, or are you still reaching outward, hoping something will complete you? Why does trying harder often make things feel even more stuck? Because control, when driven by fear or urgency, doesn't resolve resistance. It amplifies it. The more you attempt to force an outcome, the more your system signals that something is wrong, incomplete, or at risk. And that signal becomes the dominant frequency behind your actions. Control feels productive on the surface. It looks like planning, fixing, adjusting, overanalyzing. But underneath, it is often a response to discomfort, the need to eliminate uncertainty. And in doing so, it creates a loop. You act to reduce tension, but the very act reinforces the idea that tension exists. This is how resistance sustains itself. Now imagine shifting from control to alignment. You still take action, but not from pressure. You move with clarity instead of urgency. You allow space for outcomes to unfold, rather than tightening your grip around them. This doesn't mean passivity. It means precision. It means trusting that not everything needs to be forced to be real. So pause and consider. Are your actions creating flow, or are they quietly reinforcing the very problem you're trying to escape? Why do certain patterns repeat in your life, even when you change the circumstances around them? Because external change, without an internal shift, is only a temporary rearrangement. It may look different for a moment, but the underlying structure remains the same. You can change the person, the job, the environment, even the strategy. But if your internal state, your beliefs, emotional patterns, and identity remains unchanged, you will recreate the same dynamics in a different form. Not because life is against you, but because your system is designed to return to what feels familiar. Familiar does not always mean positive. It means known. It means predictable. And the mind prioritizes familiarity over expansion because it interprets the unknown as a potential threat. This is why people leave one situation only to find themselves in a similar one again. The surface changes, but the pattern persists. Real transformation begins when you stop trying to fix the external reflection and start examining the internal source. So ask yourself honestly, are you trying to change your life, or are you still carrying the same identity into every new situation you enter? What if the life you see is not reality itself, but a filtered version of it, shaped by a frame you didn't consciously choose? From early experiences, subtle messages, and repeated emotions, you begin to build an internal lens, a frame of reality. And once that frame is formed, it quietly organizes everything you perceive. You don't see everything. You see what matches your frame. Out of countless possibilities, your mind selects the evidence that confirms what you already believe. If your internal narrative says, "Things don't work out for me," your perception will highlight every delay, every rejection, every obstacle. Not because those are the only things happening, but because they are the ones your system is tuned to recognize. This is not a flaw. It's a function. The brain is designed to filter, simplify, and confirm patterns. But when the frame is unconscious, it becomes a loop, self-reinforcing and invisible. And here is the turning point. The moment you become aware of the frame, you are no longer fully controlled by it. So reflect deeply. What if the limits you experience are not fixed realities, but reflections of a frame you've simply never questioned? What if you are not missing opportunities, but simply not perceiving them? This idea challenges the assumption that reality is fixed and objective. In truth, your perception is highly selective. Out of millions of pieces of information available at any moment, your mind filters and organizes only what aligns with your existing beliefs. This means your experience of reality is not neutral, it is biased. Not intentionally, but systematically. If you believe people are unreliable, you will notice every inconsistency. If you believe success is difficult, you will see every obstacle more clearly than every opening. Your attention becomes trained to confirm what feels true to you, even if that truth is limiting. And here's where it becomes powerful. The moment your internal frame shifts, your perception shifts with it. Opportunities that were always present suddenly become visible. Solutions that once felt impossible begin to appear obvious. Nothing external needed to change first. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, are you truly seeing what is possible for you? Or are you only seeing what your current beliefs allow you to recognize? Why do you sometimes find yourself repeating experiences you consciously want to avoid? The same type of relationship, the same emotional pattern, the same outcome, just wearing a different face. It can feel frustrating, even unfair. But beneath that repetition, there is a deeper mechanism at work. Your system is not only driven by what you want, it is driven by what feels familiar. Familiarity creates a sense of safety, even when the experience itself is not ideal. If you have spent years associating certain emotions, uncertainty, rejection, struggle, with your identity, your mind and body begin to recognize those states as normal. And anything outside of that can feel uncomfortable, even if it's healthier or more aligned. So without realizing it, you gravitate back toward what matches that internal baseline. Not because you choose it consciously, but because your system is trying to maintain coherence with what it knows. This is where awareness becomes transformative. So ask yourself honestly, are you pursuing what you truly want? Or are you unconsciously returning to what feels most familiar to who you believe you are? What if part of you is actually invested in staying exactly where you are? Not because you consciously want it, but because there is a hidden benefit you've never fully acknowledged. This is one of the most subtle and powerful dynamics shaping your reality, the unconscious payoff. Every pattern, even the ones that frustrate you, often carries a silent reward. Staying in a familiar struggle can protect you from deeper risks, rejection, failure, exposure, or even success itself. Holding on to the identity of being stuck can excuse you from taking bold action. Feeling unworthy can shield you from the responsibility of receiving more. These payoffs are not logical. They are emotional, and they operate beneath awareness. So while one part of you says, I want change, another part quietly maintains the current state because it feels safer, more predictable, more controllable. This is why effort alone doesn't always lead to transformation. Because you're not just working towards something, you may also be protecting yourself from something. So pause and ask yourself with honesty, what might you be avoiding by staying in this pattern, and what part of you still benefits from it remaining the same? What if the beliefs shaping your life are so familiar that you no longer recognize them as beliefs at all? They feel like facts, like obvious truths. But when you slow down and listen closely, you may begin to hear the quiet phrases guiding your perception. Life isn't fair. I'm not clear. I'm trapped. I'm not worthy. These are not just thoughts. They are lenses. And once a lens is installed, everything you see passes through it. You may not repeat these statements consciously every day, but they echo in your decisions, your reactions, your expectations. They influence what you tolerate, what you pursue, and what you assume is possible for you. Over time, they become the architecture of your identity. And here's the challenge. Because they feel familiar, they rarely get questioned. They operate automatically, shaping your experience while remaining invisible. But the moment you begin to observe them, something changes. You create space between you and the belief. So ask yourself carefully, which of your truths have you never questioned? And how might your life shift if you stop treating them as facts? What if everything you experience, people, opportunities, even obstacles, is not random, but a reflection of who you are being at a deeper level? Not as a judgment, but as a mirror. A precise, unbiased feedback system that responds to your dominant identity. This idea can feel confronting at first, because it shifts the focus away from external blame and brings it inward. But within that shift lies your greatest leverage. Your identity is not just what you say about yourself. It is what you consistently feel, expect, and unconsciously assume to be true. And life organizes itself around that center. If you carry a sense of doubt, you will encounter situations that reflect uncertainty. If you hold a belief of limitation, your environment will echo it back in different forms. Not to punish you, but to confirm coherence. And here is where power returns to you. Because if reality reflects identity, then transformation is not about chasing new outcomes. It is about becoming someone for whom those outcomes are natural. So pause and ask yourself, if your life is a mirror, what is it currently showing you about who you believe you are? Why does trying to change people or fix situations so often leave you feeling drained, frustrated, and stuck? Because that effort is directed at the surface, not the source. It's like trying to adjust a reflection in the mirror without changing what stands in front of it. When you focus on controlling external conditions, how someone behaves, how events unfold, how quickly results appear, you step into a reactive position. You become dependent on variables you don't fully control, and that dependence creates tension. But what if the real point of influence is not outside, but within your own frame? When you shift your internal state, your expectations, your emotional baseline, your identity, you begin to interact with reality differently. You notice different cues. You respond instead of react. You create space for new outcomes to emerge without forcing them. This is not passive acceptance. It is strategic redirection. Because the moment you stop trying to rearrange the outside and start realigning the inside, the reflection begins to change on its own. So ask yourself honestly, are you investing your energy in changing what you see, or in transforming the one who is seeing it? What if the moment you recognize your pattern is the exact moment you begin to break it? Not after you fix everything, not after you become perfect, but right at the point of awareness. Most patterns persist not because they are strong, but because they are unseen. They operate automatically, repeating the same emotional responses, the same interpretations, the same choices, without interruption. But awareness interrupts the loop. When you pause and observe your reaction instead of immediately acting from it, something subtle shifts. You create distance between the stimulus and your response. And in that space, a new possibility appears. This is the beginning of freedom. Because once you can see the pattern, you are no longer fully identified with it. You begin to realize, this is something I experience, not something I am. And that distinction changes everything. You don't need to fight the pattern. You need to see it clearly enough that it loses its automatic control. So take a moment and reflect. What pattern in your life keeps repeating, and what would change if you simply observed it, without immediately becoming it? Why do certain moments trigger such strong emotional reactions, even when the situation itself seems small or unrelated? because what you are reacting to is rarely just the present moment. It is the past, resurfacing through a familiar emotional signature. A tone of voice, a delay, a look, a message, something subtle activates a deeper imprint. And suddenly, your response is amplified. Not because of what is happening now, but because of what it represents to your internal system. These triggers are not random. They're signals. They reveal where old programming still lives, where identity has been shaped by past experiences that were never fully processed or redefined. Most people react automatically. They defend, withdraw, overanalyze, or seek control. But the moment you begin to recognize a trigger as a reflection of past conditioning, you create a powerful shift. You stop asking, "Why is this happening to me?" and start asking, "What is this showing me about myself?" And that question opens a different path. So reflect honestly. The next time you feel triggered, will you react from the past, or will you use that moment to rewrite the pattern? What if the weight you feel is not coming from the situation itself, but from the meaning you've assigned to it? Because the moment you label something as life-changing, rare, my only chance, you amplify its importance. And with that amplification comes pressure. Pressure narrows your perception. It tightens your body. It accelerates your thoughts. And without realizing it, you begin to act from tension instead of clarity. You overthink. You overcorrect. You try to control every variable. And in doing so, you move further away from the natural state where things flow. But when you consciously reduce the importance, when you begin to see the outcome as something valuable but not defining, your entire system relaxes. Your actions become cleaner. Your presence becomes steadier. You reconnect with your natural rhythm. This is not about lowering your standards. It is about removing the emotional weight that distorts your interaction with reality. Because what feels heavy is harder to receive. So ask yourself honestly, have you made this outcome so important that you've unknowingly made it harder for it to enter your life? What if the reason something still feels distant is because it doesn't yet feel natural to you? Not impossible, not undeserved, just unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity creates subtle resistance. Think about anything that already exists in your life. You don't obsess over it. You don't question whether it will stay. It feels normal, integrated, part of who you are. There is no emotional charge around it, because your identity already includes it. But when something feels extraordinary, rare, or too good, your system doesn't fully recognize it as yours. It places it outside of your current identity. And anything outside that identity requires effort, tension, and often overcompensation to reach. This is why shifting perception matters so deeply. When you begin to normalize what you once placed on a pedestal, you reduce resistance. You stop treating it as something that completes you and start seeing it as something that aligns with you. And that shift changes how you show up. So pause and reflect. Does what you desire feel natural to who you are? Or does it still feel like something you have to fight, prove, or struggle to deserve? What if letting go didn't mean losing, but finally becoming free to receive? Many people confuse detachment with indifference, as if releasing emotional dependence means you no longer care. But true detachment is not about suppressing desire. It's about removing the emotional weight attached to it. You can still want something deeply. You can still move toward it with intention and clarity. But instead of needing it to define your worth, your happiness, or your identity, you relate to it from a place of inner stability. This is emotional independence. When you are attached, your state fluctuates with every sign. Every delay feels like rejection, every uncertainty feels like loss. But when you are detached, your center remains intact. You are not thrown off balance by external shifts. You remain steady, present, and open. And from that openness, your actions become more aligned. Your decisions become clearer. Your energy becomes more consistent. So the question becomes, are you holding on to what you want with tension, or are you allowing its space to come to you without needing it to complete you? What if the ease you're looking for doesn't come from controlling life, but from trusting it? This is where many people hesitate because trust feels intangible. It doesn't give you the illusion of certainty the way control does. But control is often just a response to fear, the need to predict, manage, and secure every outcome before it unfolds. And yet, the more you try to control everything, the more tension you introduce into your system. You begin to overanalyze, second-guess, and anticipate problems that haven't even appeared. Your mind stays in a constant loop, trying to create safety through certainty. But life doesn't operate through certainty. It operates through flow. When you begin to trust, whether you call it intuition, intelligence, or something greater than yourself, you allow space for that flow to guide you. You still act. You still choose. But you are no longer forcing every step. And in that space, something unexpected happens. Things begin to align with less effort. So, ask yourself honestly, are you trying to control your way into the future, or are you willing to trust your way into it? What if the part of you that insists on control is not protecting you, but quietly limiting you? The ego thrives on certainty. It wants guarantees, clear paths, predictable outcomes. It tries to calculate every step so nothing feels uncertain or out of place. But here's the hidden cost. When you demand certainty, you reduce possibility. Because anything truly new, any real expansion, exists outside what you already know. And the ego resists that space. It interprets uncertainty as danger, even when it is simply unfamiliarity. This is why overthinking becomes so exhausting. You're trying to solve a future that hasn't revealed itself yet. You're trying to force clarity before movement. And in doing so, you delay the very experiences that would naturally create that clarity. When you loosen your grip on certainty, you don't become lost. You become available. Available for insight, for timing, for unexpected opportunities that could never be planned in advance. So reflect for a moment. Is your need for certainty guiding you forward? Or is it quietly keeping you within the limits of what you already know? What if the turning point in your life doesn't come from figuring everything out, but from finally allowing things to unfold? There is a quiet intelligence operating beyond your constant analysis, beyond your need to predict every outcome. And when you begin to trust it, your relationship with life changes. Flow is not something you create. It is something you stop interrupting. Every time you force, rush, or overcorrect, you step out of that natural current. You tighten your perception. You narrow your options. You move from alignment into resistance. But when you soften your need to control and remain present with what is unfolding, you begin to notice something different. Guidance appears in subtle ways. An idea, a conversation, a timing that feels almost effortless. Not because life suddenly became easier, but because you are no longer working against it. This is the space where things begin to connect. So pause and ask yourself, are you trying to force your path into existence? Or are you allowing yourself to move with a deeper rhythm that already knows where you're going? What if change doesn't happen in a single moment, but in the quiet repetition of who you choose to be every day? Many people look for breakthroughs, sudden shifts, dramatic transformations. But real identity change is often much more subtle. It is built through consistency. Each time you respond differently, think differently, or hold your state instead of reacting, you are reinforcing a new internal pattern. At first, it may feel unnatural, even uncomfortable, because you are stepping outside of what your system recognizes as familiar. But repetition begins to rewire that familiarity. What once felt forced begins to feel normal. What once required effort begins to feel automatic. And over time, your identity adjusts to match the version of you that you are consistently embodying. This is how transformation stabilizes. It's not about doing something perfectly once. It's about doing it consistently enough that it becomes part of who you are. So reflect honestly. Are you waiting for a moment that changes everything? Or are you willing to become someone new through the small, repeated choices you make every day? What if the beliefs guiding your life are not permanent, but choices you've simply repeated long enough to feel true? Most people treat their beliefs as fixed, like conclusions they've reached about reality. But beliefs are not facts. They are interpretations that became familiar through repetition, emotion, and reinforcement. At some point, often early in life, you formed ideas about yourself and the world. Maybe you learned that things are difficult, that people are unreliable, that success requires struggle, or that you are somehow not enough. And over time, those ideas stopped being questioned. They became the background of your thinking. But here's the shift. If a belief was learned, it can be redefined. Not by denying reality, but by choosing a new frame and reinforcing it with awareness and consistency. When you begin to adopt beliefs like things can be easier, or I am capable of navigating this, you start to alter your internal filter. And that changes what you notice, how you act, and what becomes possible. So, ask yourself honestly, are your beliefs truly yours, or are they inherited patterns you've never consciously chosen to keep? What if you are not discovering reality, but constantly confirming what you already believe about it? This is one of the most overlooked mechanisms shaping your life. Your perception is not neutral. It is selective, biased, and deeply conditioned. Every day, your mind scans the world for evidence, but it doesn't look for everything. It looks for what matches your internal expectations. If you believe things are hard, you will notice complexity more than simplicity. If you believe people are distant, you will focus on what feels like rejection rather than connection. And each time you notice that evidence, your belief becomes stronger. This is how loops are formed. It's not that your belief is always true, it's that your attention keeps proving it right. You filter out what doesn't fit and amplify what does. And over time, this creates a reality that feels consistent, even if it is limited. But the moment you become aware of this bias, you gain leverage. So pause and reflect. What are you repeatedly proving to yourself every day? And what might you begin to see if you allowed a different belief to guide your attention? What if the relationships and situations you tolerate are not random, but precise reflections of how you see yourself? This can be uncomfortable to face because it removes the illusion that everything is happening to you. Instead, it reveals a deeper alignment between your internal value and what you accept externally. If, at some level, you feel unworthy, overlooked, or not enough, you may unconsciously allow dynamics that confirm that belief. Not because you want to suffer, but because your system is maintaining coherence with your identity. You might stay longer than you should. You might accept less than you deserve. You might explain away behaviors that don't align with your deeper needs. And all of this happens quietly, often without conscious awareness. But the moment your internal value shifts, your tolerance shifts with it. You begin to notice what you once ignored. You begin to respond differently. And naturally, your environment starts to reorganize. So ask yourself honestly, are you choosing your experiences from a place of self-worth, or are you accepting what matches the way you currently see yourself? What if the thoughts you hear in your mind are not who you are, but patterns you've practiced? Most people move through life fully identified with their thoughts. If a thought appears, I'm not ready, this won't work, I always mess this up, it is immediately believed, as if it were a direct reflection of truth. But what if it's not? Thoughts are often repetitions, echoes of past experiences, conditioning, and learned responses. They arise automatically based on what has been reinforced over time. And because they are familiar, they feel convincing. But familiarity is not the same as truth. The moment you begin to observe your thoughts instead of merging with them, a separation occurs. You realize that you are the one noticing the thought, not the thought itself. And in that space, you regain choice. You can question it, redirect it, or simply allow it to pass without acting on it. And that changes everything. So pause for a moment and ask yourself, if you are not your thoughts, then who is the one observing them? And what becomes possible when you stop letting every thought define you? What if the reason you feel stuck is not because your story is true, but because you're attached to being right about it? This is one of the most subtle forms of resistance. Not clinging to outcomes, but clinging to interpretations. Your mind builds narratives to make sense of your experiences. This always happens to me. People don't appreciate me. I never get the opportunity one deserve. And over time, these narratives become part of your identity. They give you a sense of certainty, even if that certainty is limiting. But here's the hidden dynamic. The moment you become attached to your story, you begin to defend it. You look for evidence to confirm it. You resist anything that contradicts it. And without realizing it, you keep recreating it. Because being right feels safer than being uncertain. But freedom begins when you loosen that grip. When you allow yourself to question the story instead of protect it. So, ask yourself honestly, what story are you holding on to so tightly, and what might change if you allowed yourself to be wrong about it? What if a single shift in focus could change the way your entire reality responds to you? Not by forcing outcomes, but by altering the state from which you engage with life. This is where gratitude becomes far more than a positive emotion. It becomes a recalibration of your internal field. When you're focused on what is missing, your system contracts. Your attention narrows around absence, and your energy reinforces the sense that something is lacking. But when you consciously bring your attention to what is already present, what is working, what is available, what is unfolding, you create expansion. Gratitude does not deny challenges. It changes your relationship to them. It softens resistance. It opens perception. It stabilizes your emotional state. And from that stability, your actions become more aligned, more intentional, more effective. You begin to operate from sufficiency instead of deficiency. And that shift changes what you attract, what you notice, and what you allow. So pause and reflect. Where is your attention anchored right now? And is it expanding your reality or quietly reinforcing what you feel is missing? What if action is not the problem, but the energy behind your action is? Many people believe they're doing everything right. They are working, planning, trying, pushing forward. And yet, the results feel inconsistent, delayed, or blocked. Because action alone is not what creates alignment. It is the state from which that action is taken. When you act from pressure, fear, or desperation, your movements carry tension. You overextend. You rush. You second-guess. And even if you take the correct steps, the energy behind them creates friction. But when you act from alignment, When your state is stable, clear, and internally grounded, your actions become precise. You don't do more, you do what matters. You don't force outcomes, you create conditions for them. This is the difference between effort and effectiveness. Aligned action feels different. It is focused, calm, and intentional. It doesn't drain you, it reinforces you. So ask yourself honestly, are you taking action to escape where you are? Or are you taking action from a place that is already aligned with where you're going? What if your greatest power is not in reacting, but in remaining untouched by what tries to pull you out of yourself? Emotional neutrality is often misunderstood. People assume it means becoming cold, distant, or disconnected. But in reality, it is the opposite. It is the ability to stay fully present without being destabilized. When you are easily triggered, your state is controlled by external events. A message, a delay, someone's tone, an unexpected outcome, and suddenly, your energy shifts. You react, and in that reaction, you reinforce the very patterns you are trying to change. But neutrality interrupts that cycle. It allows you to feel without losing yourself, to observe without collapsing into the emotion, to respond instead of react. And in that space, your actions become intentional rather than automatic. This is where real power begins. Because when you are no longer governed by emotional impulses, you stop feeding the patterns that keep repeating in your life. So pause and ask yourself, when something challenges you, do you become it, or can you remain steady enough to choose how you respond? What if the flow you've been searching for has never been absent, only blocked? There is a current moving through your life at all times, an ongoing sequence of opportunities, connections, and timing that is constantly available. Some call it synchronicity, others call it alignment. But whatever name you give it, it operates whether you notice it or not. The difference is not in its existence, but in your openness to it. Every time you contract into fear, over-control, or attachment, you narrow your field. You focus on what's not working, what hasn't arrived, what could go wrong. And in doing so, you disconnect from the subtle signals guiding you forward. But when you release resistance, when you stabilize your internal state, trust the process, and remain present, you begin to notice something different. Small openings, unexpected timing, conversations that lead somewhere, clarity that wasn't there before, not forced, not chased, but revealed. So ask yourself honestly, are you aligned with the natural current of your life? Or are you unintentionally blocking it by holding too tightly to how things should unfold? What if everything you've been trying to change was never the real target? Not the outcome, not the circumstances, not even the timing, but the identity from which all of it emerges. Because at the deepest level, transformation is not about getting something new. It is about becoming someone different. Someone for whom what you desire is no longer distant, uncertain, or conditional, but natural. This is the quiet shift that changes everything. When your identity evolves, your perception follows. Your decisions change. Your tolerance shifts. Your energy stabilizes. And without forcing it, your external reality begins to reorganize around that new center. Not instantly, but inevitably. You stop chasing because you are no longer trying to become, you are being. You stop overthinking because clarity comes from alignment. You stop depending on outcomes because your state is no longer defined by them. And in that space, life begins to respond differently. So ask yourself, one final time, if nothing outside of you needed to change first, who would you choose to be right now? If this shifted the way you see yourself, don't let this be just another insight you forget tomorrow. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who is ready to break their pattern too. Stay with me, because this is just the beginning of a much deeper transformation.